Today is November 15th. It's the 319th day of the year, and this is the On This Day podcast. And today, a little bit of listener discretion is advised. Floyd told him there'd be a safe full of cash in the farmhouse. He knows this because he used to work on the farm as a ranch hand. The farm's owner, Herbert Clutter. He's rich, Floyd tells him. A real nice guy, too. A good boss. He pays well. Dick Hickok listens to his cellmate go on about the farmer, but all he's thinking about is that safe full of cash. When Hickok gets paroled, he joins up with another former cellmate of his, Perry Smith, who also just got out of jail. Hickok tells Smith about the safe and about the cash. They figure there must be thousands of dollars in that house, enough to live high on the hog in Mexico for quite a while. So they devise a simple plan to make a big score and leave no witnesses. The perfect score. But when Hickok and Smith arrive at the farm in Holcomb, Kansas in the early morning hours on this day in 1959, they find that the information Hickok got from his former cellmate Floyd Wells was wrong, and their simple plan goes south. The Clutter farm is located just outside the town of Holcomb in western Kansas, close to the Colorado border where the land is as flat as can be and the sky goes on forever. Herbert Clutter is a prominent member of the Holcomb community, one of the wealthier farmers in the county, chairman of the Co-op Equity Exchange, and an active member of First Methodist Church in nearby Garden City. Herb and his wife Bonnie have been married for 25 years. Together, they have 4 children, 2 older daughters who've moved out of the house, one married with a child in Illinois, and the other engaged in studying to be a nurse in Kansas City. Their 2 younger children still live at home. Nancy, who's 16, and described as the town darling, and Kenyon, 15, tall and strong yet severely myopic. In a previous winter's blizzard, Kenyon rescues a pair of full-grown sheep, carrying them 2 miles through the bitter storm. Nancy is president of her class, an accomplished musician and rider, the kind of young woman who excels in every activity and still manages to find time to help younger girls with their baking, sewing, or music lessons. After midnight on this day, all 4 members of the Clutter family who are living in the house outside Holcomb are sound asleep. When Perry Smith and Dick Hickok arrive at the Clutter farm in the middle of the night, they have no trouble getting in the house. No one locks their doors in the middle of Kansas, at least not until after this day in 1959, when Hickok and Smith's simple plan goes awry. They let themselves in through an unlocked door and search the house for the safe full of cash. But there is no cash in the safe, because there is no safe. They search the house, but can't find any money anywhere. They wake up Herb Clutter, who's asleep in a downstairs bedroom, and ask him about the money. Clutter tells the 2 intruders that there is no cash in the house. Well, not much, maybe like $50, but he writes checks for all of his business transactions and has no need to keep large quantities of cash on hand. The big score Hickok and Smith anticipated is turning into a big bust. They wake the rest of the family asleep upstairs and tie everyone up with nylon rope that they bought the day before in Emporia, Kansas, on their drive to Holcomb. The 2 ex-cons leave Nancy and Mrs. Clutter tied up in their upstairs bedrooms and take Kenyon and Mr. Clutter down to the basement, forcing Kenyon down on a couch in the kids' playroom and Herb Clutter down on the floor in the furnace room next door. Herb Clutter is in his pajamas and, with his hands tied, a piece of tape over his mouth, lies uncomfortably on the cold concrete. They find a large cardboard mattress box in the basement and throw it on the ground for Herb to lie on. Then they continue searching the house, but to no avail. All they manage to find of value to them is the $40 or $50 in cash, a pair of binoculars, and a transistor radio. Smith and Hickok return to the basement and question Clutter again. He swears there's no cash in the house. Whether they believe him or not, they decide to follow through with the only part of their simple plan that they can control. As Perry Smith later says of this moment, quote, "I didn't want to harm the man. I thought he was a very nice gentleman, soft-spoken. I thought so right up to the moment I cut his throat." Perry Smith stabs Herbert Clutter and slashes his throat. After that, he fires a shot from his shotgun into Herb's face. As Smith walks around Mr. Clutter's body, he steps into some of Herb's blood and unknowingly leaves a print, the distinct pattern on the sole of his boot, 2 circles in the center of the triangular toe. Smith walks into the playroom. The killer's had earlier given Kenyon a couple of pillows, propped under his head to make him more comfortable. Now, Smith fires his shotgun once into Kenyon's face. Then upstairs, where he also shoots Nancy and Bonnie Clutter. All 4 members of the Clutter family, murdered in cold blood on this day in 1959. A short article about the murders runs in the New York Times a few days later. It catches the eye of author Truman Capote in the New Yorker magazine. Capote travels to Kansas and spends the next 6 years in Holcomb and Garden City, interviewing, researching, ingratiating, synthesizing, and writing what he calls a non-fiction novel, one of the first true crime books ever published, his masterpiece entitled In Cold Blood. It's published first as a 4-part series in The New Yorker, a year after Perry Smith and Dick Hickok are executed for the murders. Capote's story is then released in hardcover in 1966. But before Truman Capote first hears about this shocking crime, before anyone in the country, in the state of Kansas, in the town of Holcomb learns of this horrific, senseless tragedy, sometime around 9 in the morning on this day in 1959, one of Nancy's friends, also called Nancy Ewalt, is dropped off by her father. She's to accompany the Clutters to church in Garden City. But when no one answers the door, she and her father grow concerned. Herb Clutter would never miss church just to sleep. They go into town to find another of Nancy's friends, Susan, who also is to accompany the Clutters to church on this day. Susan returns with them to the Clutter house. The 2 girls enter the house, the father feeling he's not dressed appropriately to enter the home of such a fine family, what in his work clothes and muddy boots and all. As Susan recalls, as quoted in Capote's In Cold Blood, quote, "We walked in and I saw right away that the Clutters hadn't eaten breakfast. There were no dishes, nothing on the stove. Then I noticed something funny, Nancy's purse. It was lying on the floor, sort of open. We passed on through the dining room and stopped at the bottom of the stairs. Nancy's room is just at the top. I called her name and started up the stairs. The sound of our footsteps frightened me more than anything. They were so loud and everything else was so silent. Nancy's door was open. The curtains hadn't been drawn and the room was full of sunlight. I don't remember screaming. Nancy Ewalt says I did. Screamed and screamed. I only remember Nancy's teddy bear staring at me. And Nancy. And running. There are 46 days left in the year.